President Salva Kiir has rejected opposition calls for him to resign as part of efforts to end a civil war there. Well, Kiir has accused anti-government groups of making unreasonable demands in peace talks. Despite several agreements and ceasefires, fighting has rumbled on in South Sudan, killing tens of thousands. In the Addis Ababa talks led by East African bloc IGAD, 10 opposition groups last month demanded Kiir step aside. They also want a transitional parliament dissolved and replaced by a new one formed with less than 200 members. Well, to get more insight on this, we are joined by John Gachier. He is a veteran journalist and expert on South Sudan affairs. Thank you very much for joining us, John. Well, the president has called for the rebels to denounce violence before engaging in peace talks, and he's not ceding ground. So what is the way forward?
Thank you. It's really, in my view, it's that the president is buying for time, and he's trying to kind of disarm, so to speak, politically, to disarm the opposition by getting the higher moral ground. But having said that, he has a point in that violence seems to be, spiraling out of control. But he is the key player in all this, and he must own up, and he must perhaps take the leadership. That it is him more than anybody else that can perhaps resolve or meet the issues in South Sudan halfway, for lack of a better term.
Okay, well, the opposition groups, they want the president to step down. They're not having any of this. And the transitional parliament, they want that to be dissolved. Do you think their demands are impractical in the current situation?
Yeah, apparently yes, because the issues in South Sudan they're more fundamental. They're more, shall I say, long-standing, and they're just spilling over from the electoral process. And we have to understand that prior to the independence of South Sudan, there were a lot of issues that were not resolved vis-a-vis.
We're going back to 1950?
1950, 1970, 1999, and 2005. In all this, there are a lot of issues that were on inclusion, power, power, shall I say, power sharing, so to speak, and also the relationship between the different regional and ethnic groups.
There are many, aren't there? Very many ethnic
There are very
groups.
many. However, having said that, is that when the death of the then leader of South Sudan, John Garang, there were a lot of issues that were left undone and said about succession, about leadership, and about perhaps getting to grips with the issues that were underlying. And they have never been resolved, and those contradictions, power play, ambitions, personal rivalries, and what have you, are still there. But in this connection, asking the president to step aside, in my view, I think it's a non-starter, and I think it's a bad, perhaps, plan for the opposition. I think for South Sudan, you will still need Salva Kiir. Now, what role he will play and what effect it will have, you cannot just shun the guy aside. I think it will not work.
Okay, so we've got this problem here where people don't seem to be budging. The regional bodies getting involved, they're still trying to reconcile these warring sides. But it seems, as you've just described, there doesn't appear to be any political will on the part of the leaders. What then can be done to overcome this? Thank
you. I think, and I think this is the crux of the matter. The regional bodies, the countries in the region, IGAD, the African Union, they have not leveraged sufficiently. They have not used the goodwill that they've had, both political and economic, in trying to rally the South Sudan peace process. What am I saying? If you look at Ethiopia, if you look at Kenya, if you look at Uganda, and if you look at Sudan, those are the four countries that have, in my view, sufficient political, economic, and even military leverage. What have they done? over the last 5 years, they have each been kind of second guessing and trying to, backstab the other for their leverage. The government in South Sudan has used that, in my view, lack of agreed policy to take advantage. The opposition has likely done that. Let me put it this way. The opposition, as we say, can, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in Sudan and Uganda, are out there. The government people are out here. The bigger security fallout, the implications for the region are dire. And I think, for me, it's the region to hold the parties to South Sudan to account and perhaps get the elite, so to speak, in my view, that usually go into South Sudan and come out into the region to have what we call rest and recreation. It's that tragic.
Yep.
Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia and Sudan must put their act together and bring those factions to account.
Okay, on that note, we will have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your analysis. That was John Gachie, a veteran journalist and expert on South Sudan affairs.